Hello, guys, and welcome back. If you are new around here, I cover mostly Australian cases, and today we are covering another solved case. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, we are heading back to the year of 2003 to Sydney, Australia, which is where 18-year-old Lindsay Van Blanken lived. Lindsay, born August 26, 1985, was a quirky, happy teen that lived in the beachside suburb of Bronte on Carrington Road. And I'm not a Sydney sider myself, but I'm pretty sure Bronte is a pretty darn nice fancy little suburb, but Sydney friends, let me know down below. So, fresh out of school, Lindsay was making her way in the world and trying to figure out what she wanted to do. She loved to draw and was incredibly talented as well. So, when the opportunity came up to apply for her dream job at Disney, yes, the Disney, as a trainee cartoonist, she went for it. As you can imagine, hundreds of people also applied for this position. But it was Lindsay that scored the role. And I must say, how incredibly impressive to get a job at Disney at just 18 years old. No doubt she had an insane amount of talent in her field. So in August of 2003, Lindsay started working at Disney Toon Studios in Haymarket, which I believe is part of Sydney's CBD. And actually, if you Google Lindsay's name, her IMDb does still come up. With her Disney credits, or credit, she had the chance to contribute to one film called Mickey, Donald, Goofy, The Three Musketeers. I can't say I've seen it, but if you have, let me know. So when Lindsay wasn't being a cartoonist animator extraordinaire over at Disney, she enjoyed playing online games and hanging out with her boyfriend of 3 years, 21-year-old William Harold Matheson, or Will. So let's go back in time for a moment to talk about how Lindsay and Will met. In 2001, Lindsay's mother was getting married to a man named Dave Pleasance. Pleasance, yes. And her mother's name was Cynthia, by the way. So at this beautiful outdoor wedding, they had a band playing, and one of the musicians was Will. Will played cello, and apparently he was a pretty skilled and passionate cellist. And at the time, playing casual cello gigs was his main form of income. Anyway, during the band's break, Will approached Lindsay, who was 16 at this time, and a friend that she was with at the wedding. They spent a short amount of time interacting, and then Will gave Lindsay and her friend his number. Bit of a player move, but okay. Lindsay and her friend were pretty stoked to be scoring his number though, as they did think the cello player was pretty cute. And not too long after the wedding, Lindsay and Will were in contact and started to hang out. So a bit more about Will. During his school years, he was the target of bullying. He received bad grades despite actually being a pretty intelligent person, and ended up graduating with an overall low score. After school, he did a bit of work experience, but was soon going between unemployment and playing cello gigs. Will also suffered with mental health issues, in particular schizophrenia, as did his brother, who very sadly in 1991 took his own life. In Will's spare time, he played with his pet cat and pet rat, listened to heavy metal music, and enjoyed reading his favourite comic, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, which is certainly a throwback to my high school days. It's definitely not my cup of tea, but it was really popular back in the day, I guess. And if you've never heard of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, have a look it up, because it is a little bit disturbing to me, at least. Maybe I just don't get the humour, but it is from the same person that did Invader Zim, if anyone remembers that. Or am I just showing my age now? Moving on. So back to Lindsay and Will. Although I did call them boyfriend and girlfriend, they actually never put a label on it. Or should I say, Will pretty much refused to put a label on their relationship. As to why, I have no idea. Lindsay was actually Will's first girlfriend and they had been seeing each other for a couple of years, so you'd think he would want to call her his girlfriend, but apparently not. And because they weren't a boyfriend and girlfriend, according to Will, although they were intimate, they didn't do dating type activities, movies, dinner, what have you. Often the pair would just spend their time going for late night walks, like in the middle of the night, late night, talking, hanging out, listening to music, which is, of course, all well and fine. However, the lack of a label in their relationship was not the only issue. Those around Lindsay could see how controlling and possessive Will was of her, and how much what he said and did was influencing who Lindsay was becoming. Lindsay was somewhat morphing herself into at least what she thought Will wanted her to be. She dressed like him, she acted like him, and she liked what he liked and did pretty much what he wanted. I do think, though, that at that age, it is so easy to be in a manipulative and controlling relationship and not even be aware of it. Often it'll be people around you that are the most aware of it and can notice the changes in your personality. And it's not until you're out of that relationship that you suddenly snap out of this spell that you were under. So after but not really dating Will for the last few years, Lindsay met someone else. In 2002, Lindsay struck up a friendship with a boy she met in an online game, 22-year-old Brandon Leonard, who was a hairdresser from all the way over in Seattle in the US. And comment down below if you are from Seattle, by the way. It is definitely one of those places on my bucket list to visit. I am a massive Nirvana fan. But anyway, irrelevant. As I said, at first the pair were just friends, chatting away frequently in emails and messages. Brandon said that they had connected on an intellectual level, and funnily enough, because they had never actually seen each other, Brandon initially thought Lindsay was a boy. That was until they decided to do a video chat, and he was quite surprised to see a very pretty girl's face pop up on the screen in front of him. So their online friendship slowly started to develop into a relationship, and by 2003, their relationship was pretty serious. So much so that they considered each other boyfriend and girlfriend. Finally, somebody was willing to call Lindsay their girlfriend. And at this point, things had well and truly fizzled out with Will. Or so Lindsay thought. It was around this time that those around Lindsay noticed that she was reverting back to her old self, and in general, she just seemed happier. By July of 2003, Brandon was ready to pop the question. Despite having never met Lindsay in person, he asked her to marry him, which of course she said yes to. And I believe he actually sent the engagement ring over, which was a ring set with a single sapphire and 3 diamonds. So of course, given that they were now engaged, they decided it was time to meet in person. So Brandon arranged flights to come meet Lindsay in person in Sydney that September. But before Brandon's arrival, Lindsay decided that she needed to talk to Will and let him know things between them were officially over for good. But she had a feeling he may not take it well, and she was right. Despite the fact he never called Lindsay his girlfriend, he was angry about the breakup and wanted to know why she wanted to break things off with him. Very wisely, Lindsay decided to not tell Will about Brandon and simply told Will that she just didn't love him anymore. It was pretty much a typical case of, now I can't have you, I want you. So September rolled around and Brandon arrived in Sydney. Meeting a love interest you've only really met online, I'm sure must be a very nerve-wracking experience. But luckily for Lindsay and Brandon, the love they felt for each other over the internet was only amplified by meeting in real life. So the couple's plan for the next few months was as follows. They planned to stay in a granny flat, which was behind Lindsay's parents' home in Bronte until December. And on December 22, they planned to fly out to Seattle so Lindsay could meet Brandon's family, experience her first cold Christmas. Yes, we have boiling hot Christmases here in Australia. And by late December, they had planned to be married. Unfortunately, Lindsay and Brandon did experience some bumps in the road over the next several months, and these were all caused by none other than Will Matheson. You see, Will had not quite accepted that Lindsay had decided to break things off with him. In fact, he appeared to have become more obsessed with Lindsay than ever post-breakup. At one point, he even showed up at Lindsay's house and yelled at Brandon, telling him to go back to Seattle because Lindsay was still his girlfriend, according to him, which is pretty ironic. Brandon pretty much told him where to go, but Will did not get the message because he started following or more like stalking Lindsay wherever she went. Will would show up at Lindsay's workplace, at her bus stop. He would be at the shops when she was. Wherever she went, he would somehow pop up. And because Will was unemployed at the time, he had all the time in the world to dedicate to obsessing over Lindsay and following her every move. And I also don't think I mentioned, but Will only lived a suburb over from Lindsay. So I guess you could say that him bumping into her all the time, he could just put that down to, well, he lives in that area. He's going to bump into her. But it was to the point of obsession. Lindsay's workplace, however, was nowhere near Bronte. And even Lindsay's work colleagues noticed that Will was showing up at her workplace several times a week. But when they asked Lindsay about Will, she simply said he was an old school friend and she apparently wasn't too bothered by his presence. Of course, it is certainly possible that Lindsay didn't realise how serious the situation actually was. She had obviously cared for Will in the past and likely assumed that he was simply struggling with their breakup. And my guess is that this is the reason that she never contacted the authorities or got a restraining order against Will. Maybe she even felt sorry for him. Who knows? But regardless, the stalking continued and it never stopped, right up until the day that Lindsay vanished. So let's talk about Monday, November 24. As they always are, it was an ordinary day. Lindsay headed to work at Disney that morning, catching the train in and finishing up at around 5:30. From there, she caught the train home to Bondi Junction, arriving at around 6 p.m, which can be confirmed by CCTV footage. After she disappears from CCTV, it can be assumed that Lindsay began her walk home, which according to Google Maps is a roughly half an hour walk, but this is a bit of a guesstimation on my part because I don't know Lindsay's exact home address. I also did see that Brandon did expect Lindsay home at around 6:30, so this matches up with a half an hour walking timeline. However, after the point in which she disappears from a CCTV, Lindsay Van Blanken is never seen or heard from again. As I said, Brandon expected her home at 6:30, and when she didn't show up, he becomes very concerned, as it is completely out of her character to not let anyone know if she's had a change of plans. Brandon does try to call her mobile phone, which by the way was a Nokia 5510, which is one funky looking phone, but you'll have to let me know if you remember that phone. But anyway, her phone was switched off. And as more time passes, Brandon becomes increasingly worried and, of course, lets Lindsay's family know what's going on. and they soon do phone the police to report her as a missing person. So as with most adult missing person investigations, police do have to consider the idea that they simply ran away and don't want to be found. After all, as an adult, you have every right to disappear, I guess. Her mother, Cynthia, does consider the possibility that maybe the stress of Will's behaviour, the engagement, the upcoming wedding, and travel plans have all become a little bit too much for Lindsay, and she just needed a breather. But on the other hand, she loved her job, she loved her fiancé, and realistically, no one believed that she had got up and left off her own accord, although they did hope that she did. Lindsay's bank account had also not been touched since the day she disappeared, and her phone did remain off. Cynthia did make a public plea that if Lindsay was out there, that nobody was mad at her and everyone was desperate for her to return, but they received no response. As more time passed, the investigation began to lean towards the very strong possibility that Lindsay had met with foul play, and they had two pretty good places to start their investigation, or should I say people. Brandon and Will, two pretty strong contenders, you might say. You've got the angry, bitter, stalker ex-boyfriend over here and the online fiance that has only just flown in from the US over here. And now she's missing. It didn't really look great for either of them. Both men are questioned, of course, and both men deny any involvement and provide the police with alibis. So let's start with Brandon Leonard. First off, he really didn't have much to gain from killing Lindsay. After all, they weren't married yet. Did he really fly halfway across the world to do something to this girl that he had met on the internet? It's possible, of course. There are some pretty sick people out there. However, he was at Lindsay's home at the time she went missing, and this was confirmed by Lindsay's family. Then we have Will. Will, who had been bitter and angry about their breakup, and Will, who had been stalking Lindsay for months. Let's go over what he claimed happened the day Lindsay went missing. First off, Will admitted to seeing Lindsay not once, but twice on the day she went missing. Once at her workplace around lunchtime, and once at Bondi Junction after she got off the train. I'm actually not 100% sure if it was Will himself that admitted to seeing Lindsay at her work, but a Disney colleague told investigators that that day he had seen Lindsay around lunchtime having what looked like a bit of a confrontation or a disagreement with a male, and this male was later identified by the witness as Will Matheson. As to what they talked about to this day is not known. And then we have the run-in at Bondi Junction, which Will says was just a coincidence. Unlikely, but also possible, as I said, he lived very close to that area. He actually lived over in Randwick, which I think is about a suburb over from Bronte. So Will says he ran into Lindsay at the Cock and Bull Hotel in Bondi Junction at around 6 p.m. From there, he says the two of them walked along Bronte Road talking until they reached the Charing Cross Hotel in Waverley, which was around a 10-minute walk from the Cock and Bull. At this point, Will says they parted ways. Lindsay continued up an alleyway next to the hotel, and Will says that he crossed the Queen's Park, the park in Queen's Park, to get home. According to Lindsay's parents, though, this was a very strange route for Lindsay to be taking home, as it was a bit of a detour, but of course it could be argued that if her and Will were walking and talking, maybe they decided to part ways at a halfway mark between their homes. Although from what I did read, where Will claims he left Lindsay was just a few hundred meters from her home, and in fact her home was apparently within view. Will's parents confirmed that by 7 p.m. Will was home, but he did leave not long after as he was playing a concert, playing cello at the nearby Waverley College at around 7:30 that evening. And witnesses at the concert said that Will was acting completely normal the whole night. So Will's story does place him with Lindsay at around 6 p.m. and by 7 p.m. he's home. Could he have killed her and disposed of her body in 1 hour? Probably, possibly. There was one thing investigators were extremely suspicious of though: scratches on Will's body. But he claimed these scratches were from his pet cat and pet rat. But police weren't convinced. Also, as part of the investigation, police made a reenactment video of Lindsay's last moves on the day that she went missing in an effort to jog the public's memory, especially if any of those people had seen her with Will, but no useful leads ever did come of this. Lindsay's family also put up missing persons posters around her local area outlining her appearance and what she was wearing on the day that she went missing, and it read as follows: black jacket, black t-shirt, faded purple tight-fitting long pants, US Army style boots laced up to the knee, black, and carrying a black coloured vinyl backpack, wearing 2 silver hooped earrings and an engagement ring set with a single sapphire and 3 diamonds. So weeks would pass and it appeared that investigators were getting no closer to finding Lindsay. Christmas and New Year both came and went, and still Lindsay was missing. In the meantime, her fiancé Brandon returned to the US, telling the media it was going to be a sad and miserable Christmas without Lindsay. So we're going to jump back in the timeline for just a moment to 2 weeks after Lindsay's disappearance, when a very, very strange incident occurred. Police were in the suburb of Queen's Park when they spotted a young male with a backpack lurking around in the very early hours of the morning. Nothing illegal about that, of course, but they stopped him anyway because he was looking pretty darn suspicious. The male lurking around was none other than Will Matheson. Police asked him if they could see the contents of his backpack, and he obliged. In his backpack, Will had a Stanley knife, several pairs of latex gloves, an axe, a pair of scissors, a torch, a candle, and a candle holder, cling wrap deodorizer, and a bottle of water that Will told the police was holy water. Of course it was. Will then explained to the police that he was off on a picnic because these are totally normal picnic items. And after this bizarre explanation, for some wild reason, the police let him go. What the actual heck? So now we're going to skip to Saturday, January 10, 2004 in the suburb of Queen's Park, which is right near where both Lindsay and Will lived. The building maintenance inspector of a block of flats on 52 Queen's Park Road was sent out to investigate a foul smell that was coming from the storage area. The smell had been lingering for several weeks and multiple residents had complained, but as it got hotter, being that it was December, January, which is summer here in Australia, the stench had become unbearable. The residents suspected it was just a possum or some other animal that had died somewhere, but regardless, they needed the situation dealt with ASAP. The inspector entered the garage that led to the open storage room, and he made his way towards a pile of junk and rubbish in the corner of the room where it appeared the smell was the strongest. He removed the junk until he reached a large Slazenger brand sports bag, which was about 1 metre long. That clearly had something rather large in it. The inspector grabs the bag and starts to move it, dragging it along the floor as it is quite heavy. And as he does, to his complete and utter shock, a severely decomposed human hand falls out. He, of course, immediately phones the police, who arrive and cordon off the area as a crime scene. When they look inside the sports bag, they find the body of what appears to be a female doubled over in the advanced stages of decomposition. Around the neck of the victim are 2 incredibly tight cable ties that have been joined together, indicating the person died of strangulation. In fact, these cable ties were so tight, they were barely able to cut them off the victim. The media, of course, soon picks up on this story that human remains have been found in Queen's Park, and they begin to report it. And of course, it isn't long before Lindsay's family also hear of these news reports. Remembering that Lindsay did live right next to Queen's Park, her family began to wonder if this discovery could be Lindsay. But they did assume that investigators would have informed them before the media picked up on the story if there was any chance it could be her. But tragically, her family would soon be informed that the remains found were indeed those of Lindsay Van Blanken, confirmed by the fact she was wearing the clothing that she had been wearing on the day she went missing, and she still had on her engagement ring from Brandon. Strangulation was found to be the cause of her death, and she was believed to have died on the day that she went missing. What was not found with Lindsay, though, was her black vinyl backpack that she had with her on the day she went missing, containing her phone and wallet, amongst other things. And I'm not going to get into this until the end of the video, just to keep things in a chronological order, but her backpack and the items in it would actually end up turning up very close to where her body was found in 2016, a whole 13 years later, along with some very, very strange items. Now let's talk about this sports bag or cricket bag, I believe it was meant to be. As it was fairly distinctive, investigators used this as their first clue. They wanted to know who owned it, where did it come from, and did anyone recognise it. They started by finding out where this particular bag was sold, and luckily for investigators, it turned out that this bag was literally sold in only one store in Sydney, Rebel Sports in Bondi Junction. So very, very close to where Lindsay and Will lived. And not only that, but only one of this particular style of bag had been sold in the last 6 months. And as it happened, it was sold just 2 days before Lindsay's disappearance. This bag had been paid for in cash, meaning they couldn't use a bank card to trace the buyer. So investigators decided to look at CCTV footage from the area. And wouldn't you know it, at around the time that the bag was sold, just a few 100 metres from Rebel Sport, they spotted Will Matheson. Of course, this didn't prove he bought it, but when Will's father comes forward and says that himself and Will had been shopping in Bondi Junction that day, and that he had seen his son with a sports bag, it pretty much confirms to investigators that Will was the one that owned this bag. To add to the evidence against Will, a friend of Will's, Chris Murahai, could be wrong on that pronunciation, handed police 2 items that Will had given him just after Lindsay's body was discovered. One of these was a tape and the other was an art diary. On the tape was a recording of a song Will wrote that started with these lines. Just the other day, I watched you pass away. You said I love you, but please let me stay. Help is not here for you or for me. Close your eyes. Where you go is where I'll be. I'll meet you in eternity. And if I can find a recording of this, I'll add it in here because honestly, it is creepy as all heck. And the art diary actually belonged to Lindsay. Her art diary had been one of her prized possessions, and according to her family, she never ever would have handed this over to Will. So, of course, at this point, as you can imagine, police are pretty darn keen to speak to Will Matheson. But as they would soon discover, Will was actually in a hospital in a psychiatric ward following a mental breakdown that happened just after the discovery of Lindsay's remains. Because of this, investigators were forced to wait until March to speak with him. When they could finally question Will, he maintained his innocence. When questioned about the sports bag, he told investigators that he had bought the bag that day, but he lost it the same day, and he had not seen it since. Will would, however, later admit to hearing voices that told him to hurt himself and others, but that this did not include hurting Lindsay. And I really don't want to comment on whether this had anything to do with his schizophrenia, because honestly, I don't know the first thing about schizophrenia or what those that suffer with it go through. So I'm just going to stick to the facts as much as possible about what Will said and did. So investigators also asked Will if he would be willing to do a walkthrough of where himself and Lindsay went or walked on the afternoon that she went missing. He agreed, and as part of this walkthrough, investigators actually took him to the block of flats where Lindsay's body was found. They asked Will if he had been there before, particularly the storage room, and he said yes, that he and Lindsay used to go there when they were dating to just be alone, listen to music and hang out. Investigators walked him to the garage where the storage room was and asked him if he would like to walk inside and have a look. Will, who was visibly shaken, said he did not want to and asked to end things for that day. Investigators also managed to put a hole in Will's version of events when he said he walked home through the park in Queen's Park after parting ways with Lindsay. As it turned out, there had been a sports game going on in the park, so it would have been impossible for Will to cross through it. The last thing worth noting is something that Will said to his father. When Lindsay's body was found, he said to his dad, "I think I did it." But when questioned about this pretty damning statement, Will clarified what he meant was that he felt responsible for letting Lindsay walk off on her own the day she disappeared. So Will Matheson was eventually charged with the murder of Lindsay Van Blanken, and a trial began in 2004. And I'll give you a quick rundown of the version of events that investigators believe actually happened the day Lindsay was killed. They think that Will planned to run into Lindsay in Bondi Junction on November 24, likely being pretty familiar with her work schedule. The pair then possibly did walk together for a while talking, and at some point Will managed to allure Lindsay into the storage room of the Queen's Park flats. But to this day, it's still unknown how he got her in there. Once in the storage room, Will, who had pre-made the cable tie device by joining two separate cable ties, attacked Lindsay, placing the device around her neck and tightening it until she passed away. And the way the device was made and the way, of course, cable ties work, once you tighten them, the only way they can be untightened is by cutting them off. So obviously Will had every intention of strangling her and killing her that day. And the fact he had bought the sports bag 2 days earlier and had the cable tie device ready and with him strongly suggests premeditation. It's then believed he put her body in the bag and attempted to hide it or disguise it with other junk in the room, and Lindsay's body would remain there for the next 7 weeks. And as for the run-in with the police 2 weeks later, when Will claimed he was going on a picnic, well, who really knows? Considering the contents of the backpack, I honestly think he was going to retrieve Lindsay's remains and dispose of them. I mean, an axe, latex gloves, and glad wrap, not to mention candles and holy water. But I'll let you come up with your own theories on that one. But chances are, once the police stopped him, it scared him off and he just left the remains where they were. So in 2005, Will Matheson was found guilty, and the following year he was sentenced to a non-parole period of 18 years with a maximum term of 27. Although 9 years later, this would be reduced to 25 years due to a legal error. Justice Jane Matthews also noted during the sentencing that she personally did not believe that Matheson's schizophrenia had much of anything to do with the fact he killed Lindsay. And Will Matheson is eligible for parole in 2022, so basically a year and a bit away, with his maximum sentence expiring in 2029. But that, my friends, is not the end of this case. You may remember me mentioning Lindsay's backpack and her various other belongings that never showed up again. So her backpack was actually found in 2016, buried at a construction site in the suburb of Randwick, where Will lived, and also very close to where Lindsay's remains were found. Inside this backpack, they also found a pair of Lindsay's boots, her wallet, a Discman, throwback, some CDs, and her Nokia 5510 mobile phone. This backpack was almost like a time capsule of 2003, or maybe more like a snapshot of Lindsay's short life, frozen at that exact moment. But if you're thinking just this discovery alone is strange, wait until you hear this next part. And near the backpack, several bones and bone fragments were found. And as they dug a little further, more bones were uncovered, including a leg bone and a skull with a nail in it. Of course, police were immediately informed and a crime scene was soon established. In the end, a total of 40 bones and bone fragments were uncovered, 12 of those being human, and the rest were animal bones. The state coroner concluded that the human bones belonged to a minimum of 2 females, but possibly as many as 11 individuals. It is of course assumed that Will Matheson was the one that buried the backpack there, and as it did turn out, Will was also an avid collector of bones. I don't know why he chose to collect bones. I mean, I guess people can collect what they want as long as it's, legal. However, when the human bones discovered were more closely examined, it was concluded that at least 3 of them were from medical deceased bodies donated for medical research. And although the other bones could not be identified, it was thought that they were most likely also from medical research. But in the end, it was thought that Matheson likely did not know that his bone collection included human bones, and he inadvertently picked up a few along the way. But when he killed Lindsay, he decided that any form of bone collection, animal or not, would probably make him look pretty bad, so he buried it along with her backpack. But you'll have to let me know your thoughts down below on this rather strange and unusual discovery. And I do want to thank you for being here and listening to Lindsay's story. Also, since I think this will go up around Christmas or close, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, etc. Happy New Year. I don't personally celebrate, but hey, maybe you do. So enjoy. your holidays. And also thank you to my shining stars, my channel members. And thanks to all of you for your continued support in 2020. And also, because of the nature of this video, I'm going to leave resources down below that can assist you or someone that you may know if you are in an abusive relationship or a domestic violence situation. But until next time, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I will see you very soon in 2021, which, fingers crossed, is a better year. Bye, guys.